call the meeting to order. Attendance, you got that, Steve?
Absolutely, we have a quorum.
Approval of the minutes,
I move approval.
second.
Second.
All those, any comments, questions about the minutes? All right, all those saying aye, approve the minutes.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, minutes approved. Finance, approval of the disbursements. Hey, Steve, on that, so are we're 10 months into the,
Almost at the end of April, yes. Yeah, so this is current through last week. So we have 2 months in the fiscal year to go. And one thing I want to note on that, Chairman, is there with the flooding and even, some the winter that we had, there has been some discussion with many of our tenants about giving a little bit more time for some catch-up. And so I see no problem with that. What I conveyed was is we run on a fiscal year of July through June, and so we just need to make sure so we don't have any problems from a budget standpoint for this current fiscal year to ensure that everyone is fully paid up by the end of June for our fiscal year. And so I think that I will get to kind of the flooding here in a separate presentation, but I think that is an appropriate thing given the circumstances of the last several months.
okay, and we're about 85% of budget, which is about where we should be, 2 months left, so.
And why you see a little bit of the revenue lagging is my point, is there's a couple, there's some rent, and in most cases, some of the prorated utility billing, that's just a little more laxed in the, that's been coming in. But those discussions have been held, and it will be, it will all be received by the end of the fiscal year.
Motion to adopt the financial?
I move approval.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Same opposed, no opposed, motion carries. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the Rita Rawson Union Station lease.
Sure, and this is an existing tenant of ours in Union Station. She had a primary lease with us, and then for additional space, you might recall, there was an addendum. What we have done here, it was all for just a year. So what we have done here is for beginning in July, for 2-year lease agreement, combine those two. There's no longer the addendum. It's all in one lease now moving forward. And so this is what you have in your packet, and it's for discussion tonight, and for approval we have time next month, or you can decide to do something different.
Questions, comments?
Then it will return next month for approval.
This one is the Visitors Bureau at the River Center.
At Union Station, yep. And so there's no action tonight. I meant it just to say discussion, so I kind of got ahead of myself. But I think the couple points I want to make about this is Visitor Center is Visit Quad Cities now, formerly known as the Quad Cities Convention and Visitors Bureau, is planning to return to the first level of Union Station. And there's a sizable investment that they're planning to make to do that, to get it back to where it needs to be and where they want it to be, a vibrant center, not just a boring place that people go to. They want it to be an attraction, which I think is good, tying into the neighborhood. And so basically they are planning to be the sole operator at this point, and so the previous discussions have fallen through, but this lease, the contemplated lease, does envision that they could seek a sub-leasee as well, but would be consistent with what we're wanting to see there, and and I think those are consistent with what their goals are as well for that particular center. And so it would be, in all likelihood, a 3-year agreement with them that would start in July. And so next month you will see in your packet a kind of a draft, a revised draft from what you have in your possession now, because there are some clarifications that are needed. And so we will work on that in the ensuing weeks and then present that to you for your final approval at the May meeting.
Comments, questions for Steve?
Yes, everyone's very excited about it, so.
Then we'll make it, it's next meeting, we'll have the motion on it. So that brings up flooding, Steve?
So I'm going to set up about a 4.5 minute drone footage that the city has on its Facebook page. I just thought it would be interesting. It was taken a couple weeks ago at one of our higher points, and also about where we're going to return to. Before I start that, I just want to give a little bit by way of an update. Many of you know that many of our tenants, or of the Union Station tenants, of which there are 3, currently were evacuated is a harsh word, but removed from the building because of the flooding for a couple weeks. They returned about a week ago and are able to fulfill this week by being in there. But the HESCO, as the water goes back up, the HESCOs will, on the north side, will surround the facility, and another week to 10 days probably out of the building. And so that has a little bit of an impact on our budget, because we prorate the time that these folks are not spending in the building per our lease agreements with them. On a more positive note, I mean, we've been in constant communication and have worked these things out pretty efficiently. And also the Taste of Ethiopia, the restaurant, is still planning. They've been able to remain. They have access, and so the build out has continued, and they haven't lost any time in any of this. And so they are still planning. They're looking at a mid to possibly 3rd week in May opening. And when that's solidified, you of course will be invited to some sort of opening for them. Similarly, upstream at the former boathouse at Oneida Landing, the Bud's Riverview Inn is contemplating a May opening as well. Obviously, some of these plans, I think many of these guys would like to have been opened already or just a hair sooner, but I think all of us are looking forward to a little later in May for a variety of reasons. So let me just show this. Sure, sure.
When, I know how the leases read, when they lose access, then we relieve them of their rent.
Yep.
But if you go to the freight house, you still got access, but there's no parking. So their business is dramatically affected.
Yeah, so
What happens?
So the freight house, different than Union Station, there's with River Drive, usually when all of this happens, there's a limited parking up to a point at about just over 20, and then the parking lot is completely under. But then there's still maybe a row or so in the Keene lot. So this is what was happening. People were parking in the stadium lot, and that's about the only way then you jump onto the boardwalk and then use it, because it's high and dry by about 2 feet. And so there were many nice days, especially on a couple weekends in there, where people were flocking, quite honestly. Unfortunately, it was just for a couple days. If only weekends could be, 7 days, right? But where businesses, it helped. It helped keep a bit afloat, sorry for the pun, from the rest of the week, which was very, very different case. And so, And of course, many were parking across River Drive since it was closed at the community healthcare place. And so, and you may have noted that Farmers Market had relocated a couple weeks up there. But again, that was the indoor vendors that just were taking advantage of the outdoor weather. By way of that segue, 2 weeks from now, May 4th, the Farmers Market, the outdoor season begins. And it will, for at least the first weekend, possibly first 2 weekends, will be relocated into the Scott County Administration Building parking lot, which is at the corner of 4th and Gaines Street. And so all that parking lot just south of the building will be vendors, and then blockaded for safety purposes, and all the parking, and there's a vast amount of parking right there, which is why the site was selected. For customer and vendor parking. And so opening day still goes on, just elsewhere, given the timing, the likely timing of the flooding, which according to the National Weather Service is looking to, basically we're at about 18 feet right now, and by Monday we'll be up to about 20.5. That is because of a lot of rainfall and some snow melt, but once that passes through, as long as there's not considerable storm systems that ensue for the next 10 days or so, it should, begin to recede fairly rapidly, and then the cleanup begins. So let me show this, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. There's no sound to it. So this is truly Davenport living with the
Hi,
Mississippi
this
River
is Kurt
flooding.
Allmeyer from the City of Davenport's Communications Office, and I'm here Riverside at the Freight House Farmers Market, just to give folks a view of the river as it's cresting at.
So, any
Question.
other questions? You bet.
I believe I've read that this is certainly like the 8th highest flood up to this point, but it could go down as the longest flood. Is that correct? And with each passing day, does our cost go up, or is it pretty much stable based on the fact that we have everything pretty much in place?
Yeah, I think that latter point is much more the case. And so there was the decision, one example at Union Station, so there was the evacuation of tenants, but because there is a relationship to want to try to return folks when you can and when it's safely and safe to do so and accessible to do so, they were able to they were staffing round the clock shifts, because when the HESCOs go up, there are pumps that are pumping below grade at the Union Station. You can't have that crawl space fill up with water. And so right now it's fairly dry. But the point I'm trying to make is, in an effort to save funds, instead of continuing for a couple weeks manning pumps that aren't really needing manned, we returned the tenants and we'll return the pump operation once it's necessitated, which is in a few more days. And so that's just one example where those decisions are made through Public Works, depending on the river levels. And there was always from early on the expectation that there was going to be a second crest. It was always a question of when and how much, which it still remains that question. We don't really know, but right now, early next week projections are showing kind of being right at where we were a couple weeks ago. But most other things stay in place, and so you basically just come back to that point as you need to, and then clean up. Cleanup wasn't really done because we knew within a few days it would be right back to the same situation, and so those efforts will begin in earnest when we know we're safely out of the woods in that regard. Any other questions on that? Okay.
I don't know if it's proper, but I'm your only audience member. Is this, Steve, is this the QC drone person that does the,
I'm not sure who did it. The city contracted with somebody, so.
because they do have some drones.
I work at St. Ambrose University, and that's our videographer. His name's Dan Ormiston. So, but he does, does
the
work
city
in town,
contracted
and
with
he does beautiful stuff, and he has beautiful.
You forwarded.
Yeah, I said it. He has beautiful photography as well. That he took stills when he did that. So if you look up like Davenport flood pictures, I joked him like it's
really
your
a
niche
helpful-
market.
But
Is it the QC drone person then, or somebody else?
No.
the drone was helpful, not just to kind of illustrate for those that don't have those perspectives, but it was done fundamentally to assist us and the flood plan in making sure we're consistent and that the flood plan matches that which we think it does. And so at every level we know what to expect and what to expect for the a little bit above that level. And so these are reassurances, constantly reevaluations of that plan, refinements to it. And so that's really why the city had done that, not just for the beautiful, colorful pictures, but that it's very instructive. So. Okay. I'll remain up here for the next item if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, do that.
Okay, so on strategic planning initiative and the joint work group, I've included in your packets this meeting, and as we continue on, I was looking through, because we haven't shelved it, we haven't forgotten about our strategic plan, but in fact, I was encouraged to note that many of these things have been done. I mean, the work group was a major component and we continue to meet, and I'll provide you with a little bit of a summary of recent activities there. But many of these other things, the better understanding of the budgets, the operating and CIP budgets, and even reviewing past or other existing ordinances, other communities, commission structures. I'm told through those commissioners that, those kinds of things are underway, have been done in some cases. And so many of these things are, I think, can be provided a bit of a check mark. And so I don't want us to lose sight that we're advancing. I think fundamentally, as the strategic plan outlines, the work group with council and commissioners has taken some time, as we expected it would. I think it will begin to wind up, but it is probably the single most important component piece to our strategic planning initiative than anything else. And there are some pieces as soon as that is completed that fall into place, I think, and we'll be able to even add a few more check marks to the cause once we have sort of some common understanding about the direction that we're heading. And in that regard, for the work group, it last met on April 8th. It's been meeting, we've been meeting monthly. There will be a meeting in May. It's not been solidified on the actual date yet, but I think at least another, possibly 2 meetings before the full commission and full city council will be asked to come together again, as we had figured, and reported to from the work group on our findings and recommended findings. And I think that the more work and better work we do in that work group, the better that meeting goes, frankly, and that's what we're all expecting. Where we're kind of beginning to wind up is the meat of it all, and that is the areas of responsibility. And so, having the areas of the riverfront, the vast riverfront, having it, we're not necessarily going to be at the same position in every single project as throughout the riverfront. And so some are, more partner opportunities, some are more advocacy opportunities, others are more appropriate for some early research and investigation, for lack of a better term, and so where we can lead on some of that. One example might be in our strategic plan, we talk about this concept of River West, and so around Credit Island, maybe leading up to Credit Island, some of those areas, River West is what we were referred to it as. Well, there's an opportunity for the commission, I think, to advance some initiative and to help craft a plan that can be then shared and eventually financed, that kind of thing, into the whole thing. And there are others where we already have done some of that, and like River Heritage Park further upstream, we've led that effort to the point where it is a beautiful park that is mostly fulfilled. It's just kind of waiting for another phase. But now we're kind of in that advocacy phase, working with some other partners in the community to make sure that that gets completed eventually. And Veterans Memorial Park is another example where the commission could assist the group in providing and advocating for funding and interest and promotional opportunities for it. And so those are kinds of the things where it sounds easy, and I'm probably oversimplifying it, but where we really need to kind of come together through the work group and identify those things. And then there are the operational kinds of questions too, so like the mowing and the things we all the minutia we take for granted, but we need to sort of hone in on exactly how all of that interrelates and how that's conducted, and is it the best way, or is the answer, well, that's the way we've always done it? So we're kind of beginning to peel back that onion a little bit and trying to identify and ensure that we're doing the best thing moving forward for that advances the most along the riverfront. And so I ask the others that are here today, other commissioners that are on the work group, if they have anything to add.
I always go into these things with a kind of negative attitude, I guess, because sometimes it's just a big waste of time. But in this particular case, I have to admit that it's been very, very beneficial between us, and I think it's going to end up in a much improved relationship between the Riverfront Commission and the council.
Thank you. Okay. One other thing for the benefit of the commission, Randall, actually, your colleague, has agreed to be the representative on the Main Street Landing Regional Activity Area Task Force. RAW for short, because it's a mouthful, but thank you for that. She is one of 8 members that include, that's chaired by our council liaison, Alderman Grip, but Marion McGinnis, Alderwoman McGinnis is on that. Greg Lundgren will represent the Design Review Board. Diane Franken, the Historic Preservation Commission. Tegan Trees with Parks Advisory Board. Tom Knight with the Davenport School District. And Kyle Carter with the Downtown Partnership rounds out the 8. And these guys, these individuals will be charged with meeting, but maybe hopefully not meeting too much, but respecting everyone's time. But will be charged by ordinance. The City Council a couple cycles ago approved an ordinance that would charge these 8 with recommending to the council a design firm to move forward with the next phase, which is this regional activity area at Main Street Landing, and then ultimately to review and recommend to council ultimately the final design for said place. So that's kind of a twofer, and so that's why the meetings will kind of like ramp up, and then maybe there'll be a bit of a lull, and then we'll ramp up again. Throughout that, public engagement is going to be paramount, and frankly, I see the commission interceding a little bit in that part of it. And so that's what my role is going to be, to ensure that we work in very close concert with this task force to engage the public, which is what we like to do. And so I think over the next year plus, year to 2-ish, we will be getting that feedback, but then also ensuring that the commission is along in partnering in this initiative as well. Okay, so just wanted to make mention of that. Any questions on that? A lot of me talking tonight, I'm sorry for that. Then I might, if the chair is okay with it, I might go on into a bit of a very brief staff,
Go ahead.
couple comments before Richard could provide a Parks Advisory update. I mentioned about the 2 restaurants opening and the Freight House, so I've kind of already mentioned a couple of things that I had planned to. But I also wanted to make mention that I wanted to thank Commissioner Ashton for his counsel as we submitted, working with MetroLink, a FTA, a Federal Transit Administration grant seeking funds for replacement to our existing Lindsay Park Channel Cat dock, essentially, the water taxi. And so it was, it's about 24 years old, and we are seeking these funds. It's an 80-20 match. So the city council passed a resolution in support of this initiative. Should we receive the 80%, requested that 20%, which in this case might be as much as $300,000, would be available for the match. And so we've submitted that. We wait until probably late summer to hear about that, and then it's probably a year and a half or so before construction would be finished, with that. That is federal funding through the FTA, yes. So we hope. So it's in fine, it's not problematic right now. It's in fine condition for this season and next. It's just that we're planning ahead, knowing that there aren't too many winters and floods and all of that it's going to be able to weather as well as it has.
Having designed the one that's there today, we need to replace it.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's some mistake.
But I wanted to thank him for his counsel on that, given that you were there from the beginning. So it's a great place, and that is a really nice amenity that many people use. So that's all I have right now. So
All right, thanks, Steve. Richard?
Is this on? I mean, do I need to? It's on? Okay. We, a month ago or earlier, the first of the month, took a bus trip to a few of our major, I'm sorry. I've got a teacher's voice. I'm not, you know. We took a bus trip to some of the major projects ongoing. Miracle Field. Miracle Field's coming along. Parking lots poured. A lot of that heavy excavating is done. One of the projects for this year is going to be moving the playground. I don't know if you're familiar with Prairie Heights where the baseball diamonds are. They're going to build another playground closer to the Miracle Field. Let's see, where else did we go? We went to Roosevelt Community Center. Any of you West Enders? I am. I'd have to look and see. I have to see what, I know carpeting was one of the things we were gonna do. The carpet's pretty bad. Repairing the stairs, yeah, that's pretty important. And LED lights and the sidewalk and some painting. And we got to look at the giant sandbox. I don't know if you know that they took one of the little classrooms, and in the wintertime, they build a big sandbox in there. And kids come in and play in the sandbox. And then they'll take it down. It's probably gone by now, you know, and haul the sand out. And it just gives parents a place to take their kids in the wintertime. Let's see. We went junior theater. Of course, Daniel likes to show off junior theater. And one thing we on the budget for this year is a new lift, one of the scissors lifts. I'm sure you guys know I don't know how to describe it, but they have high ceilings, and to change light bulbs is pretty dangerous. So, yeah, we approved spending $10,000 for a lift, just for safety, if, you know. Trying to think, the River's Edge, the lobby, going to do some remodeling in that lobby, get that updated a little bit. And, of course, the Miracle Field's a big one. That was about it for last month's park board meeting. Of course, you know, this flood's going to set back it's going to take a lot of the labor, a lot of the guys, you know, to clean up. So, any other questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
On the bike trail out by Hickory Grove Road, I was by there actually this morning.
The Kathy Kirschbaum bench or something?
Well, I'm not sure. There are a bunch of trees that have been cut down. Is that just right there where the little turnaround is, right
Yeah.
by Hickory Grove Road? You know where I mean? Are they making a parking lot there, or
I
that's
don't
just?
know. I'll get back to you. Unless they were
You know where
ash trees.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. I
If
wonder.
they're
But
ash
there
trees.
seems like an awful lot of them that are cut down in that one area. So I don't know.
I'll check though, Bill.
I just was wondering.
And we got a new sidewalk right there by your house, going to the dog park.
I know. I saw that. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
That brings up public with business. Bill, Handel, you have got a little 5-minute presentation for us?
I don't know everyone here. I'm Bill Handel. I'm a retired architect. Grew up in Davenport. Went to West High, Iowa State University, Bryce University in Houston. Lived there many years, and I live in Nashville right now. And retired, and I spend about a third of my time here in Davenport. And part of the reason I'm here was 5 years ago, there was the proposal, as some of you may remember, to build a very large 5-story or greater restaurant tied up against the riverfront in the location of the former dock. At that time, the Riverfront Commission, Levy Commission as it was called then, was, I think, Bill, you were there. Was it split or mostly against it? Majority against it? Okay. And the mayor at the time, Bill Gluba, was against it, and the city council, on the other hand, was 100%, this is just too short, was 100% in favor of it, and so was Craig Malin, of course, at that time, city manager. But anyway, so I started that, at that point, I had some kind of a guerrilla newspaper that I was handing out, comparing that building to the public access way and into a rat hole, which the architect had kindly shown some murals painted on the side of this very mean kind of probably a mugger's delight against the riverfront. But I've been concerned, I guess, the last couple of years, there was an RFP sent out regarding the Sky Bridge. I was concerned at that point that somebody had an in and they'd be coming up with some kind of a insensitive design to the end of the Sky Bridge. And I did this very quick study of myself and got a little play in the paper. It was dubbed Star Trek. It kind of looked like the Starship Enterprise. It was a circular restaurant at the end of the Sky Bridge, and I've since renounced any claim to that because I think it was a bad idea. But this last year, I was looking with interest to the design that was presented to the group back in February or March by the in-house, I think it was designed by the in-house landscape architect of the Parks Department. Last year? Just this year? No, last year. Last year, and because I felt it was went very strongly contrary to River Vision, both the first version and the later version. I looked at it and I figured, well, that's not going to go anywhere. And then earlier than, or maybe late last year, there was this meeting at the Figge that there was going to be a design to install public art on the riverfront, and I went there with interest, and that now has morphed into, as I see it, an entire riverfront design from Ripley to, I don't know if it's Iowa or Pershing, at a cost of $55 million if it's fully implemented. So I looked at it last week. Kyle Carter was kind enough to give me the PDFs, and I know the riverfront. I probably know it better than the RDG designers. I don't know when you're becoming a member of the Riverfront Commission if they give you a thick list of data points so that everybody's coming at the same page. Is that, I'm just saying, can we just suspend the rules since I'm the only person here? Does everyone have something, that
Steve, the
a list of
orientation,
Sorry?
accepted
the
knowledge?
orientation of the new commissioners.
We provide an orientation with them. I mean, I don't know that it's going to hit everything that you're
Okay.
speaking of, but
All right. Well, so, but anyway, I looked at that and I was aghast by the design of
Bill,
it.
you need to move along.
Okay, I'm
We've got
sorry.
1 minute left here.
Okay, well, where's the camera? See, where's the camera?
it's on a wide shot.
It's what?
It's on a wide shot.
Facing which way? Is my face?
No, it's behind you.
Okay, I just wanted to tell all the audience members that
But then you can't hear you, so you have to.
I want them to know that I'm the only person in the audience today. And even so, 5 minutes is what I'm being limited to. I think, well, I'll go quickly. It seems to me that the thing that the city needs to concentrate on right now is not so much the riverfront, but how to make it so that the city isn't paralyzed for 6 weeks as it currently is. I love the riverfront and its view, but if I were a visitor to Davenport, I would think this city does not have its act together at all. Having this weekend come from Muscatine, Iowa, our little neighbor down the river, I think every one of the members here needs to spend a couple afternoons with Muscatine's city administration and to see what we can learn from that. One of which I think is history, appropriate design. For example, as far as history, I was very, I guess, taken aback by the fact that there's absolutely no consideration for history as far as I can see on this plan. With the exception of there's the Dillon Fountain has not been removed. It looks like the railings are all gone. The first shot of at their preface shows water. I guess they're ducks at the foot of the Main Street as it currently exists. That's going to be totally gone, according to their plan, and removed over to Harrison Street. The 5 pieces of giant bus shelter looking like things called frames I guess are considered art by the designer of them, and I've seen nothing artful about it. When they're behind the Dillon Fountain, they actually obscure the beauty of the fountain against the sky and the river. In my design, my view of design for urban areas and per River Action, earlier River Vision, they had something different at 8th Street, which is kind of what you would expect. So you know where you are. They had a cannon, they had a pier, they had the Main Street area. I think something could be done at the foot of Perry Street. But to have 5 things all the same, it seems to me a lot like those stupid columns that were built around J.B. Young and Central High. The $11 million Mirror Plaza as a piece of sculpture, perhaps that atomic sculpture they have in the middle is fine, but the ramp that they have around it, if you think about any exterior sculpture, think of Chicago's Picasso or the Cloud Gate or anything, that piece of sculpture is by itself, so you can observe it in various light conditions from different angles, but they're creating a ramp all around it, supposedly so people can go up and look down at it, but unless that ramp itself is a piece of art, that's not what we want. There's of course there's a stairway at the end of at the side of the Figge facing the river. Chipperfield, I'm sure, the Chipperfield would have liked to have had the art museum built on the river, but couldn't be done at the time. So we did the next best thing, create that giant monumental staircase facing the river. But that sculpture completely obliterates the view from it. So that's not tenable at all, in my view. What I'd prefer, I'm going to take more than my 5 minutes. I'm sorry, but
Bill, you have taken more than you've taken 10. But finish up.
well,
I think some of your questions we did have Tim Schieffer at the from the Figge. We did have Tim Schieffer, the director, explaining that art piece, and we did have Kyle Carter.
Yes.
I think you need to see the live stream of our last meeting.
Okay.
Because we went through all of this, and some of your questions were answered in that presentation.
Okay.
But if you got a couple more drawings,
I would
3 more minutes. But it's
All right.
6:20. We're gonna end the meeting.
All right, thank you. I go to Memphis, I go to St. Louis, some of the important larger cities. One of the things that you see there is their historic riverfront is still there. They've kept a portion of it because of history, because it gives you access to the river, because it's beautiful. And the downtown folks in the 1950s decided that the angled parking lot that we had, just like this, all these bricks that served so well so many years, wasn't nice enough, so they covered those bricks with sand, put asphalt on top of it, gave us the parking lot we have now. Those bricks are still there. Those bricks are still there waiting to be shown the sun. And what the RDG design essentially does, to give you the same thing, the same access to the river, they're tearing down the flood wall, the seawall. They're building another curved, item made of concrete, stone, I'm not sure, to give you that same thing, whereas all we would have to do, in my opinion, is take down the seawall, uncover these historic bricks, We've got it. Something simple, something historic, something beautiful. More historic, more cost-effective, and more beautiful than what RDG is proposing. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. And Steve, there is he can comment. Isn't there a place he could put comments?
Yes.
On the website?
If the desire is to have some written, make sure some of your written sentiments are received. We set up on the website that I showed you earlier, you click on it and you can provide, it goes straight to me. I mean, you can write what you want and then the feedback is there and I can share that. I've received one comment since it's been up for several weeks.
I mean, 55 million in a city of 100,000. As I told the council last week, the St. Louis Arch was a $13 million project. And per Wikipedia, today that'd be 80 million. I don't think, that's not that much less than 55, more than 55 that we'd be paying for this. I don't think we're getting the value for our money. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. We have a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Same sign nay. We're adjourned.